Hello, listeners. Hi, my name is Madhavi, and I'm so happy to have you on UppTalk. You have come to the right place if you want to learn about IT and do really cool things with your hands. We are not just another IT company when I say UppTalk. Think of us as your learning partner dedicated to helping you reach your full potential. We have top notch hands on courses to help you build your business, whether you are new to technology or want to move up in your current job. Let's look around this as our first step towards learning.
Generally, it will be specific security only. A tenant level setups will be specific to any configuration only. If you say SAML setup, you want to know that is a tenant level because that controls whole tenant to get into the login action. That is a tenant level setup. But this one is security accessing tenant. Managing a security group is not a tenant level setup. It's a kind of access issue actually. Now let's say if Jack is not able to create a security group, this is not a tenant level set. I would to know this kind of vision is maybe small things. Sometimes if we go work at somewhere else, you don't know what we are doing here. It should not be blank. Basically, whatever you do in Workday, you perform in Workday, you see in Workday is completely based on your security. You might be not having access to create a security group, but your same team member who is with the same role with you might have access to create security group that depends upon the security that you have. Create security group access will come with security administrator and also security configurator roles. Actually, security administrator is user-based security. Security configurator can be role-based and also can be user-based. Also, some organization just grant all the permissions to security configurator and assign to those folks who can actually perform some security activities, but security administrator is a super user. Security can perform any security activity. If you're not able to perform any security, either create a user, either create a security group. It's not something at tenant level, it's something at security. How do whether that is a security issue or that is a tenant level issue? There is a simple task for you. Securable item. There is a task called view security for a securable item, which will allow you to view security for a securable item. This is the task that will allow you to identify whichever tasks that you're not able to perform. Whether it is a security issue, whether it is any other issue, this should be able to give you a kind of quick solution for you. Let's say you're not able to create a security group now. This task is create security group. Create security group. Go here and you should be getting what all the security group that should be assigned for this task. Create security. Group is a task that is under this functional area, and if you go to the security, you should be having any of the security group. Any of the security should be assigned to you. That will give you permissions to create security group actually. If anyone is not assigned to you, you'll not be getting access to create a security group. That is first thing that you need to know. Let's say now we have Jacqueline doesn't have anything, or you can be able to add. We will not have that at provision in this tenant. That's what I told. We don't have a control to assign security. If it is a role-based security, we can assign. If it is user-based security, we cannot assign it. Actually, if I go to Jacqueline's profile now, I can see what all the security that she has, but I cannot assign her security because there is a limitation that has been granted in this tenant. Actually, if I go to her profile, something on the security side. If I go, you can see security profile. You have a lot of options here, assign roles and roles. To remove role-based security can be handled actually and assign user-based security. This is where you can assign security administrator to this. If I click on this, it will not allow me, it will go off, it will come and go actually. They do not allow me to assign any user-based security. That control we don't have. But in real session we will not be seeing this. Actually, it should be if you are a security administrator, you should be able to see everything related to security. This is clear. Security groups comes under where exactly the user the specific task, the clear security group. But we are not able to add to Jacqueline. We are not able to add because Jacqueline is not a security group administrator. She is not able to add anything security to herself. Logan. If Logan is a kind of a security administrator, Logan should have access to assign security to Jacqueline, but since we have a limitation in this tenant, we cannot assign any security to the user in this tenant, actually only user-based security. But other security group we can create and fix that one also only user-based security. We have some limitations. I told you the reason also. We can create our own logins. Outside of them, create our own login and access this tenant. To avoid the things, they've actually restricted this to create user base, to create a user base security and assign that user base security to the user. Got it, got it. Understood. Now the role-based security group, which is a very powerful and important security group in whole. Workday security, we need to know. I think we learned the process also. Let me get into the These are all the steps that we have. We need to create a role first and enable that role to organizations and then create a role-based security group and assign that role whatever. We have created role-based security group and then when you actually create a role-based security and we have an option to see how you want it to have inheritance to be found actually with the role that you are creating. How do you want this inheritance to happen, whether to all the managers or to all the subordinate organizations is what you need to specify. You'll be selecting those options once you create this and have roles assigned and assign some inheritance permissions. Submit this. Once you have submitted this, your role-based security will get created. And then you can assign the domains and BPA security permissions to that, activate that security. And then you should be getting access for that role. Then we can test that user by assigning to few people actually. That's what we're going to do today. There is a task called maintain assignable roles actually. There is a task called maintain assignable role. Maintain a assignable role. Now, Jacqueline was not able to create a security group, but she is able to manage the roles. Actually, we need to know the difference because ideally, security administrator will have both access. Now, since Jacqueline is not able to create a security group, but she is able to assign roles in the sense there is a different security between these two tasks to understand the what is the security, but these two you can actually use the same task, that is review security for secure item and have a task maintain assignable roles. and functional area, and you can see here this has security administrator. And previously, whatever the what is it? Create security group. Create security group does not have a security administrator, which means that Jacqueline is part of security administrator because she is able to create roles, but there is invalid security to the security administrator. There is no access being provided to create a security group. That could be the issue because Jacqueline is able to create a role, which means that he is part of the security. She is part of security administration. Security. You can know who are all assigned with this. Users. Also, if you go to the user-based security group, you can know who are all part of the security group. Also, you can see if Jacqueline is part of whatever I was saying. That should be the correct one. You can see some members. If you go to members, you should be able to see to all this security to whom the security group is administered is assigned actually. If you see Jacqueline the security, Jacqueline is there here, which means that she is part of security administration security group. Ideally, she should have access to create security group, but what should have happened is they would have restricted create security group permissions to security administrator. Instead of giving that permissions to security group security administration, they would have removed those permissions to security administrator. That's the reason, even though that Jacqueline is a security administrator, she is not able to create a security group, which is not usual thing that you generally see. Generally, security should have all the access related to the security should have. But even though Jacqueline is a security administrator, she's not having access to create a security group, means people have removed that unknowingly actually. One question every week, every Saturday, that refresh will happen on Friday night. Will it come next week or it won't come? This always stays with this tenant. This tenant also refresh every week. No, this tenant will not refresh. This will go for. This will be down during the maintenance window. But this will not get refreshed actually. This is not when you get your system get refreshed. When you have a live environment, let's say Sandbox is there. Sandbox will go for maintenance window for every Saturday. It will get refreshed and all the production data will get copied to Sandbox. That's the general. But this tenant is not a live tenant. This tenant is not live tenant and there is no connection to any other tenant for this tenant. But if you're having a live tenant Sandbox, implementation, Sandbox, preview and your production, all these four are connected actually. All these four are connected. Whenever you're getting your implementation tenant refresh, you need to specify from which source that you need to get refreshed. But your Sandbox tenant is connected to your production tenant. Every week, when it will get refreshed, all the production data will get wiped off. All the production data will get copied to Sandbox. That's the general behavior. But this is a GMS tenant actually. This is GMS tenant, which is not connected to any live environment. There won't be any kind of refresh happening for this one. In case, if you need this, you need to place a kind of specific request. We have a GMS tenant. We have a GMS tenant and we need to have that refresh. But Workday will not do any kind of data refresh. If there is any kind of patchworks, functionality patches that they need to do, functionality is not working, In new version, the functionality is working such kind of patchworks Workday can do, but cannot copy your production data to GMS tenant because GMS tenant is a demo tenant. Actually, you'll not have any live data, you'll just have sample data that we offer in this demo tenant. Your live data. One question, we are working on real-time live data. Whatever the changes you already had in that tenant will go away or refresh it. Let's say somebody refreshes production data to sandbox data, not talking about the GMS. Some changes happened. Definitely that will get wiped off. I'm working on any of the existing testing that I'm doing in sandbox. During weekend, when they get refreshed from production, all the data that I was working this week will get wiped off. Actually, I'll be getting all the data that is sitting in production to sandbox. With that scenario, what exactly how the process will somebody working on they have to finish it, or what are the process in general? There's a process actually. There is a process that you need to consider when you're going for sandbox. Actually sandbox, that sandbox will be for only 1 week. And after 1 week your production data will get copied. As part of weekly refresh, you are knowing that. When this one, your plan of testing should be within that period actually. You're making any kind of testing, that testing should happen within that period. Once Friday your tenant is getting refreshed. By Thursday, you need to come back to the next, complete your testing and plan for deployment to production. But if a testing is taking time, you're taking more than expected. It is taking time. You have two options. One is reach out to Workday. Reach out to Workday through case saying that we don't want to have our sandbox to get refreshed this week because we've not completed our testing yet. Please do not refresh our sandbox. That Workday will exempt that sandbox refresh for that week actually. And they'll not be refreshing that one. And this request you need to place at least 24 to 12 hours before Workday that they can plan for that one. If you are just saying before or 3 hours before of the refresh time, they might not accommodate the option action. They need to have some time to manage this exemption, at least 24 hours to 12 hours you need to. Be a little advanced to update them through a request and they can consider that one. You can actually do continuously for 2 times. Third time, you cannot do this one. Today, you have some kind of emergency that you are not able to complete your testing. You can place the exemption request and next week also you have the same kind of option. You can continuously place another request, but the third time after next week, you don't have an option. Workday will not accept the third request. You only do 2 weeks continuously. After that, they cannot do. They will refresh number. Automatically, the third week it will get requested. Another question, let's say when they are implementing basically all brand new to the system. That time they won't have any requests. It's a GMS only. Let's say some X generally implementation will happen in an implementation tenant. Actually, implementation will happen in an implementation. In that name, typically called as a prototype tenant, we call it as generally. All the implementation will happen in a prototype tenant where it can be your existing implementation tenant or you can purchase your implementation for specific duration. Let's say your implementation plan for 3 months, but the just 3 months you can purchase a new implementation tenant which would be copy of your production. Now, when you're doing some kind of configuration work to that one, configuration work done, and since implementation tenant will not be getting refreshed, you don't see any harm action. Only sandbox tenant will get refreshed. You don't. Their implementation tenant will not get refreshed actually until you place a request, until you go and reach out to Workday. We wanted to have our implementation tenant refresh from production until you go and place a request with Workday. They will not be refreshing your implementation tenant. That is the reason why, for all the huge implementation tenants, the recommended tenant is implementation tenant actually, because that will not be getting refreshed every week. On demand only, we need to request to refresh on demand only. When you have a kind of requirement that your input tenant should get refreshed from production, you go and place a request as how you place a sandbox exemption request rate. Similarly, you go and place a request that you wanted to have your implementation tenant refresh, that they can actually do that request. Minimum 6 months is what Workday recommends. That your implementation tend to get refreshed. Some organizations, because of the kind of data wipe off kind of concerns they will not refresh their implementation terms, and they keep more than 6 months, 7 months, 8 months kind of things. With that, there will be a kind of performance issues you should be seeing, how we are seeing in this tenant now. Some kind of junk data performance is raising slowness, getting refreshed and all. Such kind of performance you might be, in order to avoid that kind of performances, in order to avoid that kind of performance issue, you'll place such kind of a request. In that way, thank you. You place a request with Workday for at least 6 months is what Workday recommends actually at least 6 months. You can have your input tenant to get refreshed. Go ahead. Thank you. Tenant management is separate actually. Tenant is the same. There is no separate role for tenant management, but anyone who is actually in a lead role or project lead role or a manager role will be managing the tenants actually. They'll be controlling each tenant when tenant has to get refreshed. Should be having on all. They'll be controlling that action. Not another role, but another responsibility. Basically, they know when to do, when to not to do. Take the nation makers. Let's say I've seen one of the last customer called Walmart. Walmart has around 30 implementation tenants actually. They have 30 implementation tenants, and to handle 30 implementation tenants, including your sandbox, including your production tenant, including your sandbox, and around 30 to 34 tenants are there actually. In order to maintain these 30 to 34 tenants, a separate responsibility has to be created, that the person who is managing all this tenant, the responsibility should be when each implementation tenant has to get a refresh. What is going on in this implementation tenant, and when refresh has to happen, even refresh has to be taken place for implementation tenants. Whether it has to be from production, whether it has to be from sandbox, whether it has to be from other implementation. A tenant is what you'll be planning. You'll be coordinating with all the business users. Check with them what are all the activities that they're performing. After that, you will be taking care of the request that you will be coordinating with Workday and get that request placed actually. Similarly, you might be seeing multiple tenants, coordinating with each user who is using the tenant and have a tenant plan. That would be kind of typically comes under tenant management pros. One other question, last question maybe. Now every company will have only one sandbox and one production. Tenants or more than one sandbox and one production. You cannot have more than one production sandbox and sandbox preview. These 3 tenants are part of your subscription. When you subscribe for Workday product, Workday will give you 3 things. One is production, one is sandbox preview. All these 3 will be interrelated. Data actually, all your production data will get copied to Sandbox and all your Sandbox preview tenants during the release time, whenever it is specifically for release testing. Whenever you have any release, your Sandbox preview will be used to test those release features. Actually, your Sandbox preview and your Sandbox. Release means release means. Go ahead, go ahead. I think some lag is there. Go ahead. What was the question that you're asking? No. What really means we need to develop is something we change our system, then that is called as a preview, canvas preview or no. No. If we change something, no, that is not the thing actually. The purpose of Sandbox preview tenant is whenever Workday is going a new release, how our mobiles get updated with the new features. Whenever there is a new feature, our mobile phones will be getting refreshed, be getting a kind of update. You have some new features to get updated. Your new features will be updated tonight. Kind of message be getting from the mobile provider. Similarly, Workday also will have new features actually. Every 2 times in a year, this new feature will be pushed into Workday. Every year in the month of March, every year in the month of September. These are the 2 months where your Workday will be moving from one release to another release. We call that as Release 1 and Release 2. Release that will happen in the month of March, call it as a Release 1. Release 1 and release that will happen in the month of September will be called as Release 2. When this release happens, Workday will be pushing all the new features to Sandbox Preview tenant. All the new features will be first pushed to Sandbox Preview tenant, and we will be giving 1 month of time to analyze those new features actually, to just see whether those new features are impacting your existing configuration or are they good to move to production. Workday will give 1 month of that. Let's say if March is a kind of month where new releases will be moved to production. In the month of Feb, Workday will be pushing all the new features to Sandbox Preview. You will be performing some kind of testing, do some kind of analysis, prepare a kind of impact analysis to see that all the new features the Workday has provided are not impacting any of the existing setup that you already configured. But if something is actually impacting, you can report that to Workday and Workday will be investigating that in that 1 month of period and see if there is an issue. They'll hold that new. They'll hold off that new feature release to production parent and they can go with other ones. But if there is no issue, that is just a kind of an education issue with the customer. They explain the behavior of the new feature and they let the new feature move to production on a defined date. Actually, a preview is a tenant that will specifically use for release testing. Whenever Workday is undergoing any kind of releases, Workday will automatically push all those new releases to Sandbox Preview and will perform testing there and then move that new feature to production. That is the purpose of preview and your preview. Sandbox and production will be part of your subscription. Whenever you subscribe for Workday product, automatically you will get a preview and sandboxed in subscription. But implementation is something that you need to additionally purchase, will not be part of your subscription. You need to separately purchase that. There is a reason why your implementation tenant will be getting refreshed only request. With the customer request because customer own the tenant actually because they have purchased. Additionally, they will be placing a request in case they wanted to have a refresh from production. But Sandbox is not that. Sandbox is a Workday provided tenant as part of your subscription. There is a There is a design and defined process for sandbox tenant. Every Friday it has to go for refresh, and all the production data should get copied to sandbox every week. Actually, that whenever you're performing testing next week, you should be playing around with the selected and latest data in both day. That is the purpose of sandbox for you with implementation. Tenant, that means we have only three or four types of new tenants. Now one is the implementation, Sandbox, preview, sandbox, and production. Where the development will happen in general, that's implementation tenant or some other tenant also available. It is a brand new development. If it is a brand new development that has to happen, that will start with the tenant only. That is implementation tenant. Because let me get you some additional information. You see my screen? Function sand sandbox preview implementation tenant, and then your customer central tenant. Basically, these are the 5 tenants that you typically get. Among these 5, this is not a default tenant. You need to additionally purchase actually. Additionally purchase. You can purchase any number because that's just based on your demand and your budget. You can purchase 2 implementation tenants. You can purchase 1, you can purchase 3, you can purchase 4, or you cannot. You don't need to purchase. Even there are a customer who does not have any implementation tenant also because they don't need. They are not working on heavy projects. They don't have a huge demand on projects. They won't need any additional budget for this one. They can use Sandbox Preview in that space actually, because Sandbox Preview also will not get a refresh every week. You can use Sandbox Preview in this space actually to save your budget. For small customers who are not using implementation, they can actually do. But in case if they get any kind of request to implement any of the thing in Workday, they definitely need to go for implementation, and they need to purchase implementation for specific duration. Now coming to the type of tenants, we have production sandbox and sandbox preview implementation customer central tenant. These 3 are subscription tenants. And your sandbox tenant will be copy of your production at least for 1 week. That you can call your sandbox as a pre-production tenant. Pre-production tenant because before you move to production, you will move that to sandbox, and there is a reason why it is called as a pre-production tenant or peak back production tenant. Peak back production tenant. Then coming to sandbox preview, as we discussed, it is dedicatedly used for release testing. And since the purpose of sandbox preview is different to actually do for release string, the space allocated for the sandbox preview is little lower than sandbox and implementation and production. What we call it as a memory space or the storing space kind of thing. We call it as that will be a little less than sandbox. Sandbox, then implementation, then production, because this is not designed for heavy implementations. This is designed only for release testing. You cannot perform heavy implementation in this tenant. In case if you perform, the performance will be little low. Your performance cannot be same as sandbox, same as production, same as implementation. Let's say if you are running a report that is returning 1000 or 1 lakh rows of data in sandbox, which is taking 1 minute of time in your sandbox tenant. If you do this, if you do the same in sandbox preview, it might take 2 minutes or 3 minutes because the performance space, the memory space in sandbox preview is not equal to other tenants. Actually, that's sandbox preview. And then implementation, since at least a customer will have a recurring projects every year. Performance review has to happen every year. For every employee has to review every year, actually at least every. Most of the organization will go for 2 years, media review, half yearly review or annual review kind of things. But at least minimum to minimum, one review has to happen for every employee, which is annual review. That can be a recurring project actually. Performance can be one. Compensation review can happen. Your compensation needs to be revised actually. On a year that has to happen. Compensation review has to happen. And then your benefits, specifically US employees. US employees will be getting benefits for an employer on their first day. They should get their default benefits actually. The benefits has to be allocated for every employee on their first day. And every year they'll be enrolling into new benefit plan or changing the existing benefit plan or add their dependents, add their children. Every year these changes has to happen. There is a defined period, October to October. There is a period called open enrollment period where all the employees of US will be enrolling these dependents or selecting new plans, removing the existing plans, waive the existing plans and subscribe for new plans during that open enrollment period. And this open enrollment also is a project that will happen for 4 to 6 months actually. Even this is a recurring project. You have these heavy recurring projects happening every year, at least even for small customer. When they wanted to perform any kind of testing, any kind of a huge configuration for this one, your preview tenant might not work actually because the capacity of the a preview tenant is little low, your preview tenant cannot handle. In that case, at least one implementation tenant is recommended for every customer. What they can do is they can do these recurring projects and test that one. If there are any changes, they can perform these changes. Their implementation tenant is the first step that you need to step to perform any kind of implementations, any kind of heavy enhancements, any kind of heavy troubleshootings. Your implementation tenant is the kind of first tenant that will address all these issues. One question here. Basically, the job recruitment, let's say we have everything, those where exactly it directly goes to production or where they are going to implement. Say I have to get a job profile or a recruitment or both things, any company that comes under recruiting module actually. There is a recruiting module that will be there whenever you, let's say you're a hiring manager. You are a hiring manager and you have a position called Workday Developer. Workday Developer position that you are looking for. You will be creating a job description for all the roles and responsibilities that they should be performed for Workday role. You will be creating a job description and share to the recruiter. A recruiter team will do, they'll reach out to Workday team and we have a job description for hiring manager from hiring manager and we need to have a job profile to be created for that. be requesting a job profile creation. What work the team will do is, since job profile cannot be created in as a kind of separate instance, once job profile is created, they will attach that job profile to the position actually, meaning that every supervisor organization will have members. Now, they'll have members who are part of that, and they'll be reporting to the manager who is managing that supervisor organization. There will be a position in the supervisor organization where once employee fills that position, become member of the supervisor organization. Now, when you actually get a job description for your requirement, Workday team will be creating a position, or recruiting team can create either Workday team or recruiting team. Both, only these two teams can take this responsibility. If the recruiting team is not aware of this thing, the team will be creating a job profile and position, and they'll use this job profile in the position without position. Your job profile is blank. When you're creating a position, your position should be attached to the job profile. What the team will do is they will create position with the developer, attach this position to the job profile actually. What job profile will be consistent of is all your job information here. Basically, the definition of job profile is to define the characteristics of a job. It defines all the characteristics of a job. You'll be mentioning your level of the job and a description of the job which talks about roles and responsibilities. And your compensation, how much compensation that you need to get for this job. And then you'll be giving grade of the job grade, and country or location of the job. All this information you will be making for the job profile. Actually, considering all this information, you will be creating a job profile and you will attach the job profile to Workday development position. Now, once you have job profile ready, what recruiting team will do is they'll do job posting. They will do job posting. In order to do job posting, they need to have a job requisition. Job requisition, which will be holding this information, which will be holding job profile information. They will take a job profile and create a job requisition. Once they have a job requisition, they will do job posting actually. What is job posting? Posting your job to the job market. Actually, it is a LinkedIn. Now create anything. They'll do your job requisition through job posting, and your job posting will be available for all the job portals actually, and any candidate who applies for that requisition applies for a requisition will be treated as an applicant actually. They will be called as an applicant because they are applying for a job. They'll be treated as an applicant. Once they apply for a job, they'll become an applicant, and your recruiter will be moving this candidate to multiple stages. Candidate is applied for a job. Now the recruiter will be moving that candidate to interview stage. Once the interview stage is completed and candidate has shortlisted for the interview, and once the interview stage is completed, be performing another stage called assessment. Actually doing any kind of organization policy assessments, or on once assessment is completed, do a kind of reference check actually. Check employment reference check or background check. Anything can happen in this stage. Once the background check is completed, if there is a satisfaction result with the background check or reference check, your recruiter will move the candidate to offer stage actually, offer session, where your offer letter can be released for the deploy. Once the candidate accepts that offer, that candidate will be moved for ready to hire stage. Actually, ready to hire stage will connect your recruiting system to core HR system. connects to HR system, and from here your hire business process will take the data. Candidate and hire into Workday. Business process will trigger and hire employee into Workday. This is how employee life cycle will happen from recruiting system, and here these two can happen before. Also, you're after your offer stage if you're recruiting that after offer stage you can perform a reference check and background check. This will come after the offer stage, or if before offering, if they wanted to do any kind of reference check or background check, they can do this and then go for offer stage. These two can be here, and they are actually, but this is the process how you typically see in Workday a recruiting process. One question here, we have these many steps. Where exactly this fault? Everybody directly, this happens on a sandbox or production, all these steps. This is a live transaction. No, this is a live transaction. You apply for, let's say you see a job, open job for a developer role in Amazon. And LinkedIn, you have seen that there is a open position over Amazon. What you will do, you will apply for that one. That will direct to Amazon recruiting system. Actually, once you apply for a job, that will hit to their Workday system and their requisition will be having your application. They'll call you, they'll take all your information if they feel that your qualifications are meeting their expectations. They'll schedule an interview. Once the interview is completed, they'll move your candidature. If you're through to the interview, they'll move your candidature further, actually to reference check or background check. Once that is done, they'll move your stage to offer. Once the offer is moved, they'll move to ready to hire, and from there, your Workday system will be hiring you into the Workday system. That's how that will happen, since this is the live transaction that should have production only when you're making this configuration, when you're doing any kind of a recruitment business process configuration. If you wanted to test this one, as how I've explained, if this has to be tested, whether all the data explained are working correctly or not, you need to test this in non-production term. You'll be performing any kind of configuration as production and do testing. If it is working as expected, you can perform live transaction Workday itself. Production itself, you can perform and have transaction. Process successfully got it. Generally, they will test it in lower environment or directly production environment itself. They can test it. No, test it we cannot do in production. If you're making any change in production, you cannot directly make the change in production. You need to make the change in sandbox and ensure that sandbox changes are working fine. Get it and provide a sign off from business and then make the similar change in production. Sandbox is the one before preparing. Sandbox is the one that be doing for all the break fixes and small fixes. Actually, for all the time taking fixes, if it is taking more than 1 week or 10 days kind of things, you go for implementation tenant. Got it understood? Thanks. That's how you are. Recruiting cycle will work. And if you are managing Workday recruiting, will be this most of the organization. They will have a recruiting system in a different system and Workday in a different system, meaning that they might have Greenhouse as a kind of recruiting system, not Workday recruiting. They might have Greenhouse as a recruiting system because the cost of Greenhouse is a little lower than Workday. The thing that let's go with the Greenhouse. Only they say that all the recruiting process, whatever I've explained here, all this is still here. Till this process will happen in Greenhouse system. Job pushing, job acquisitions, applications, everything will happen in a Greenhouse system. And then once the candidate is ready to hire. You'll be creating an integration. Actually, you'll be creating an integration that integration will pick this candidate who is in ready to hire stage and process that into Workday. That integration will be taking care of getting the candidates from Greenhouse to Workday through integration process. Your integration will get that candidate from Greenhouse to Workday. Understood? That is a process actually. That is a life cycle of an employee which you need to know. All the security content, those are all actual content you should be able to get. But these are all foundation concepts which you need to know before you start knowing something about Workday. Good. Now getting into the security. I think we are almost closer to the time. Probably we can start creating the role-based security in our tomorrow session. But try to understand the difference. At least try to create a role today. Sure. Let me share my screen. Why we actually came to all the discussion? Because we were actually checking the security of maintain as a name. Because Jacqueline is able to create a role. But why she is not able to create a security group is what our question was. Because maintain assignable role is assigned to security group. Sorry, the security administrator, but create security group permissions are removed from security administrator. There's a reason why Jacqueline is not able to create that. When you go for maintain assignable roles, you generally will not see this many roles in real system. Here you see around close to 900 roles. Actually, 900 roles, that's a huge number, and you will not be seeing that. In general, you will not see that huge number. You'll hardly see 30 to 40 rows. That's it because we will not have any dummy roles or any kind of testing roles here. And now here you can see with the same name, there will be a lot of roles. Actually, people will be creating. I myself would have created at least 20 roles by now. Oh, see, this kind of behavior in real tenant, you should not be seeing that huge count actually. Now, when you create a role, here is what you will be specifying where you wanted to use that role actually. Role-based security is nothing but in constraint. You will be restricted access based on the organization. That's why your access will be limited based on the organization. You can limit your security based on the organization. That's what your constraint access means. Now we are creating one role here. People partners. We have people partners. I can enable this first company. I can enable this first any organization. Wherever you wanted to use, that company. Filter or the level you first define there in the role. Actually, let us we can append other roles also. Let's say we created a company later for this role. We can assign others also. We can enable. No, you cannot assign to when I say that you enable, not assign. Let's say people created, we just added only company. Can we edit again? We need to add company. Let's say now we have enabled for only company. Now, later on, after 1 week, you think that the same rule should be restricted for even costs. Also, you can come here and add cost center company, hierarchy, cost. Center cost, center hierarchy. This you can add location, hierarchy also you can add. You got. These are all the organization entities. You can also add a supervisor organization. Also for supervisor organization also, you can add supervisor is nothing but supervisor organization. We will enable this role first to all these organization levels that when we create a role-based security group, when we attach this role to that role-based security group, that role-based security group can be used at this organization level. If you have not added company and then you wanted to use at company level, you cannot use that because you have not enabled at company level. No, you cannot use your role at company. That's the reason whenever you're making a role, you need to have a clarity. What is the requirement? Why you are creating this role where the access has to be restricted at company level or at location level or at organization level, wherever you want it to have, you can actually enable all those things and use it from there. What Workday role does here above, the left one before. Which one? This you don't need to give anything. This can be blank. This can be something. If there are any kind of specific roles for your organization that you have created, those can come here, but you don't need a specific Workday role here. All you need is your role that you have created and needs to be enabled for your organization. If anything's specific to the role that you have already created, that also should be mapped to this one, and both should be enabled for this one that you can do. But you'll not be getting that kind of requirement or that kind of possibilities when you're managing rules. And then here I told you for every security thing that you need to have it administered by security administrator. With that you have all the required input. For your row you have added and then click on your role will get created. And then when you create a role by security group, you'll be taking this role to role by security and manage those the show in it, yes. Wherever you've added the organization, that will be defaulted to that organization now, and based on you assigned to any specific person that will be getting inherited actually to a supervisor organization called the Workday. Or from there, if you create any subordinate organizations for this people partner, will get inherited to all the subordinate organizations. This is self-explanatory, restricted to assign self-assigned role. BP is restricted to single assignment. You can assign it anywhere. Once you have role-based security assigned with this role, you can go ahead and assign that role-based security group BPs. Anywhere that you wanted to control your BPs, you can go and do that. You can do it anywhere. Once you have a role-based security created with this role and assigned permissions, you can use that anywhere. Please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more information, contact us sales@therightuptalk.com.